Well, it's wonderful to be here, and thank you so much for joining me. And it's lovely to see people from both sides of the Atlantic. As I said earlier, here we are. It's getting dark, and there's a terrible gale blowing outside. And there you are in midsummer with incredibly high temperatures. So it's more of a contrast we couldn't have. In fact, I'm just going to do something now. Okay, see them. Julian bought me some beautiful tulips earlier, and I thought it would be lovely to have them in the background. And then I went and sat right in front of them. So I'm hoping you can see them in the background now. They're very pretty, and a bit spring-like, which is nice. So yes, it's lovely to see everyone. And I think I spoke earlier before everyone had joined about how the accident, the happy accident of being involved with poets in South Africa as well as here. And that was because as a journalist, I was quite often back in South Africa, either doing articles or at one point I was there for a month researching a book about heroes of the struggle who were at university with me, much braver people than me. And one day, you know, I happened across a bookshop with a poetry meeting, and there was an open mic, so it sort of went from there. So just to introduce the book, in some ways, it's taken me forever to write this book because I've been as a national journalist here for the FT, the Guardian, the Observer, etc. And I've written non-fiction, I've written young adult fiction. There's often been a South African link, but I wrote poetry all the time, right from the age of 6, but I never really got it published. So it's just in the last couple of years that I've got my act together, not least because my sister kept saying to me, Jan, yes, but what about the poetry? What about the poetry? And finally, so the book, of course, is dedicated to her. And I'm sorry she can't be here tonight, but she will look at the recording, I think, like quite a few other people. So, yes, I mean, I would just say very briefly before reading that growing up in South Africa affected me profoundly, as it would all of you. The world has fed into my work as a journalist. Being feminist in a country that was inherently violent towards women, particularly Black women, birthing and growing your own children, and how that takes you back to your own childhood, so far away, grieving your mother while she's still alive and suffering with dementia, thousands of miles away. Poetry is the means by which I write most deeply and passionately about my real life, the life that runs below my work life like an underground river, the things that demand that I take up my pen. As Lena will know, I often write poems while writing, not necessarily writing in company because then we're chatting, but many poems. And first of all, I used to be galloping through the Port Jackson brush and the sand dunes in South Africa. And later, obviously, in the UK, I live on Ashdown Forest, which is the home of Winnie the Pooh, and it's 6,500 acres of beautiful countryside. So I'm often riding, but also thinking. And a lot of poems have come to me that way as I've ridden across the forest. And I recently used my phone to record a poem about the death of a very dear person in our family. I spoke, I stopped my horse, I cried, I continued. The lovely old piebald cob, Archie was his name, listened to me, waited patiently among the bluebells as I spoke into my phone, continued when I wanted to continue. By the time I'd returned home, the poem was finished. It hardly changed in editing. I had felt it, heard it, become it, rather than written it. It was done. And to this day, when that poem is one among many others in this first full poetry collection, it remains my favourite way of writing poetry. The two are bound together, writing and riding, two themes and reasons and seasons of my life. So I'm going to start with the poem that I've just spoken of. Grief is quite a heavy theme in my poetry, and this poem was about my sister's husband who left us very suddenly, and this is the one I wrote while on the back of a horse, and it's called That First Day, the Woodpecker. Now I just have to find it if you'll bear with me. I've got lots of bookmarks in here and stickies. Here it is, the woodpecker. That first day, the woodpecker, for my sister on the death of her husband. That first day, a woodpecker knocks secretly between the thick trunks, and you can't see it, though you look. Cowslips fling their yellow quilt across the field where he ran his crazy dog. A cuckoo runts in the horse-loud yard. In the woods, the trees show you their tiny, aching leaves. Stumps, clean-cut, sober, point their pale faces to the sky. The fucking birds won't stop singing. By the path, armies of imperious bluebells insist you look at them. You go on across the shining stream. The mud grabs at your clumsy feet. You know you will have to pick up this weight, but you don't know how. When you get home, the key rings in the quiet lock. A single swallow washes her wings on the wire in front of the house, tilting first one way, then the other. So my sister has had a fair amount of grief in her life. She's the most wonderful woman, but grief has visited her, and she's been extraordinary throughout. But another poem, which I wrote years and years ago now, is about her best friend, who's called Madeline. I'm just going to have to look up the page, 69. Her best friend died in her 50s, and she was the godmother of Gail's eldest daughter, Kate. And she's called Madeline. And Kate has had a daughter called Madalena now, which is named after her. So nine, yeah. Madeline, to Gail. It's a hard thing to put your friend into the ground. It closes over her as if she is something it has found and wants. Her deep chuckle, her sideways glance, unerring way of seeing through bullshit. The clean dance of her mind. A hard thing when later your daughter is clear of the thing that killed your friend, and she's the one you want to tell. The way that last day she caught the nurse up short. Sometimes when people are very ill, they like to see a priest. Well, when I'm very ill, I like to see a doctor. And when the man who always flirted with her flirts with you at her funeral, you can't tell her, though you know telling her would make her laugh. You hate the thing that returned and took her life with a merciless hand. You hate the ground that claimed her, her daughters crying and her friends silent, and the watchful sun cold on her wicker coffin. There's so much going on in the world at the moment, and because of that, it's hard to ignore, and it's often overwhelming. But it struck me that there are two poems in this, quite by chance in some ways, in this book that really jumped out at me ahead of this reading. And I'm going to read them now. One is called Mugabe. But it's not really about Mugabe. Famine starts at the heart of a man. There is an absence there, a hole no one can fill, and yet he does not look ill. His thinness is invisible. So too the swollen belly, the navel that protrudes, grey skin, huge eyes, all in a military disguise, giving the salute to crowds who approve, at the head of the motorcade, in a family near you. Starve the opposition is what men like him believe, whether dictator of a country or semi-detached in Leeds. The second poem that jumped out at me came from kind of adventure that we had, kind of crazy adventure whereby we went and lived in Idaho, of all the places in the world, of all the states in America. We went to live in Idaho, and that was because Julian's brother was there, so that was a pretty good reason. But before I left, I had supper with lunch with my former boss at the Guardian, Alex Brummer, And he'd been the Washington correspondent for The Guardian. And he said, "So where in Idaho are you going?" And I said, "Well, it's quite near Spokane. It's Coeur d'Alene." He said, but where exactly?" And I said, "Well, Hayden Lake." And he just burst out laughing. And he said, "Well, it's a hell of a place for an ex-South African to end up." And I said, "Why? You're making me very nervous." He said he was flown out there to interview the man, Richard, I can't remember his surname, who was the head of the Aryan Nation in the USA, who lived about 2 miles away from us and had a swastika flag outside. So I don't know how did we end up there, but we did. So this poem is called My Own Private Idaho, after the film, of course. The frozen lake, the frost-rimed pines, the clear blue skies were far from home. The power failed, the heat flew out, the stars were cold. Our cabin crouched beneath the pines. The baby cried. The Mormons came to pray for us and chop our wood. The baby cried. I tried to find warmth in our small house and care in the world, but by the lake a swastika flew. A skinhead shot 2 lovers, white hand clasping brown. The baby cried. We could not stay, we knew. So both of those poems remind me somewhat of what's happening in the USA today. I think I'd like to read a couple more poems. It's really another theme is gendered violence. So I promise you'll get onto some fun stuff later. But at the moment, this is another theme that's really important to me. So this poem is called Malediction. He is the hollow, cast-off skin of a puff adder that crushes beneath your fingers. He is the promise of a storm, black sky withholding thunder. He is your view from the beach, a giant blue wall of a wave with a shark in it. He is what remained in the air when the Twin Towers fell. He is the Casper that shot its hard shell path through every township. He is the absence of a warming fire. He is the last place you want to be. He is the last person you want to see. You wait. This poem is one I've actually read at Red Wheelbarrow before. And unfortunately, the day before that, I had fallen off Julian's enormous horse. And not only had I broken my shoulder, but I also had a very bad black eye. And stupidly, I read this poem, and only afterwards did I say to Julian, who was sitting next to me, did I say to him, I had to explain that, in fact, I'd fallen off a horse and I hadn't walked into a door or had anyone hit me. But anyway, this is called Body Blow. I have absorbed them all. Where other people are kissed, I'm a repository for the fist. My body is a bruise. I have nothing more to lose, nothing to gain. I've absorbed them all, like rain. And one more poem, which is in the same vein. It's called This is the Poem in Which I Left You. This is the poem in which I am still alive. This is the poem in which I left you. The white gate clicked softly shut behind me. The yew tree hung low over the driveway. Your dog came running. Jump in, I said, and opened the door. The cat in her basket on the back seat trilled a welcome. The car hummed over the speed bumps. The horses in their field whinnied to each other. She's leaving, she's leaving, she's leaving, they said quietly. My horse was already gone, already unloaded from a clean trailer and led into a clean stable, safe. Nobody dragged me back through the gate. Nobody cracked my head between the door and the jam. It is the poem in which I had already started the car and driven away. It is the poem in which I am still alive. So, another big theme, of course, in this book is my childhood in South Africa. And there are a few poems I'd like to read about that. The first one is called The Baize Door. I'm finding that my wonderful little bookmarks are not really working for me. Oh, I found it. Okay, The Baize Door. On one side, the new wall-to-wall. On the other, the linoleum was worn. At the jingling of the brass bell, with a thwack of the flapping door. Out came Beauty, forehead damp, apron skew, oval platter high with food. We sat, majestical children, swathed in linen. Our backs were straight. We did not clear. We did not make beds. We did not know where the soap was kept, or the clean sheets. The pool sparkled. The trees did not shed their leaves. And another poem which is dear to my heart because it's about the childhood not only of myself but also a dear friend who's here tonight, Fee. And it's called For Fee, Nature's Valley, For Fee. Spark struck, match lit, gas burner flares, cabin in the green high wood, the sea hushing so. It was nature's valley. It was our heaven, best friends at 10. Free until dinner time, till your mother called, we ran. Now, free until dinner time, until you call, your children run, and in the dark, half dark, she stands unseen, as the spark strikes, match lights, gas burner flares. In the cabin, in the green high wood, with the sea hushing so, and then goes. So we had many wonderful holidays in Nature's Valley. And I think that's somewhere that Fee goes a lot still. It's a very magical place with absolutely no development at all. It's just a few cabins in the woods, a lagoon and a beach. So this one is called Bloberg. When we came back on our journey to Idaho, we stopped in Cape Town, where for 9 months, which is, as long as it takes. So my daughter was born there, or our daughter. This is called Bloberg. It was an all-white wind. It scoured our faces clean. In the house with the big windows, I watched the mountain, watched the sea as it came and went, watched the wind, waited for news, wept in the big bathroom, I and my growing belly, walked the gauntlet of the neighbours' houses. We heard about your little trouble. Have you had any news? Mourned my independence, wished her more when she came. I should possibly have said that there was some doubt as to whether my baby would be born healthy. And that's where the poem started. So everything was fine. She was born healthy. But what I didn't like was the sort of sudden situation I found myself in, because as two of my other guests will know, I think, that Bloberg is a very busy little town and everyone knows everybody's business. So I didn't like that much. Right. Let me go on. So there's one more poem, which in fact was turned into a book at one point. It's called Ballet, page 23. Let's see if I can find it. I was a terrible ballet dancer. My mother had been a sort of semi-professional one, and particularly successful as a child. And she was pinning all her hopes on me, and she was very disappointed. So this is where this poem came from. Ballet. I knew what they meant. I knew why I was meant to try. I'd study myself in the mirror before I left. I looked as if I could do it. Black leotard, pink tights, the bun, that ridiculous pink elastic waistband. I loved the music, but I couldn't dance. My ankles wobbled. My mother frowned at the side of the hall. Since then, I've learned there are some things you can fake. Blondness, wit, intelligence. Ballet isn't one of them. So I'm wondering how I'm doing for time. Doing fine, okay. Right. I don't actually remember what time I actually started reading.
You're really doing fine.
Good. Okay. So things happen as you grow older, and this is the only one I want to read tonight. about the fact that in 2014 I got breast cancer. Touch wood, I feel very lucky because I'm still here. And this was something that I did after treatment and before I had to go back to a really awful job. So it's called Exit Wound, and it's for Max, who's my youngest. You want someone to look at it and gasp. You want someone else to feel it. You want someone to cry. You wish you could. Your youngest helps you most. Your nipple is suppurating in Paris, while you carefully press gauze on it in the hotel bathroom. They calmly Google radiotherapy after effects on the hotel bed. It's quite normal, Mum. It'll stop soon. They like the faint scar on your breast. It looks like a sea creature. Wants you to get a tattoo to join the ink dots that mapped where the rays healed your exit wound. And they get it. They fold their long self around the quiet groan you'd hoped they wouldn't hear, hold you hard. They're not going anywhere. So, someone else I've written about a lot is my mother. And I have a fellow poet called Mims, who can't be here tonight, although she was at my book launch, who at one point said to me, Janice, you write all these poems about your mother and they're beautiful, but how about writing about your father? And I said, well, we had a very difficult relationship. And she said, that's a good subject. So in fact, I'm going to start with reading about my mother, but there are some about my father. And in fact, the title poem is about him. So my mother in her 80s developed dementia, and it was heartbreaking. And I'm sure there are those here who perhaps have been through that with their relatives. Especially as we were so far away. My sister and I would fly out when we could, but we both worked full time, and it was quite hard to spend as much time as we would have liked to with her. So this one's called Silk Shirtwaisters from Paris. Bookmarks have been absolutely no help at all. Here we are, Silk Shirtwaisters from Paris. Clearing clogged cupboards and cluttered shelves among cracked compacts and drawers stuffed with wads of cotton wool, we found bright silk shirtwaisters from Paris, a heavy gold chain, a rope of fat, dark amber beads, mother of pearl opera glasses, an etched scarab in its polished wooden box, and a slim notebook that held a single line: Alzheimer's is an inflammatory disease. So, there we go. This one is called Making the Vicar Blush. Now, my mother was very, very religious, although when I became a Buddhist, she was very happy because she liked the fact that I'd found something that was good for me. But she really loved the vicar. I'm laughing because he was one of those very good-looking vicars that all the women fall in love with. And he was lovely. He used to come around and read to her. And on this occasion, he sang to her. And it's called Making the Vicar Blush. My mother, that is, not me. He came to sit with her every week in her neat room with the William Morris curtains and her trophies dancing on the shelves. God loves you, Lynn, I heard him say. Once, when I was there, he sang The Lord is my shepherd in his rich baritone, holding her hand in both of his. Gazing into her faded blue eyes, she and I were both transfixed. He finished, the silence rushed back in, and we found none of us could speak. Recognizing him at last, she said, James, you are the most marvelous man. And his young, handsome face blushed beet to the roots of his pale brown hair. He loves me, you know, she said once he'd left. God or James, I did not know and would not ask. Right, so okay, linen box. we are. This is called Lynn in a Box. So, Lynn in a box. This is Lynn in a box. Everything that counts has been neatly excised. The fierceness, the grey eyes, the fine sewing of her clothes, the anger, the hard, hard love in her fine hands. She wouldn't let it go. Now we have let her go. The fine grey ash, less than you would think for a woman of that fineness, less than you would think for a woman of that fierceness, less altogether, but fine, grey, fine cut, finely felt, and delicately raining on us, on the unsteady old man holding the box over the cliff's edge, and on the two daughters holding on to him, one with her thumbs tucked firmly into his belt, and into the turquoise sea below, swinging with the tide suck and the kelp's tug, 5 fathoms deep, to where the whales sleep. And because I don't want to leave that on a sad note, I want to remember her as she was for the majority of her life. She was a wonderful woman. She was very loving. She was sadly very bullied by my father, but she adored us. And there was nothing she wouldn't do for the two daughters and, of course, then the granddaughters. And she got as far as one great-grandson before she left us. And this one is called I've Made a List of Things for You to Worry About, which actually I think my husband would probably say that I'm a bit like that too. So I think I have inherited the worry button. But this made me laugh because I was back from South Africa before we went to Idaho. I had the child, a baby in arms and a toddler. Julian was still in South Africa. And I came back to a house which had been rented by an actual villain who had been arrested by the fraud squad after he'd fled from our house and he hadn't paid the rent. And we had debtors knocking on the door asking me if I was Mrs. X. And I said, no, he owes me money too. But my mother was a bit worried about the idea of me living here on my own and having all these guys come around. The back door had been stove in before we got back. But anyway, he was actually gone, which was good. So this is that was the reason for the list of things on that occasion. I've made a list of things for you to worry about, says my mother, and I listen and laugh and tell her that before she rang I was fine, thanks very much, and somehow it makes me love her more, because she prays for us children and grandchildren every day and during all important appointments and exams, always making allowance for the time difference, because she knows none of us believe, but that doesn't stop her from slipping us the odd slim volume of Christian essays, because some of the things she worries about are really wild, but she is wise and knows us, and 6,000 miles are nothing to her, because she makes lists before she rings us. And despite taking all possible care over timing, often the landline rings in the middle of a crisis. A child has broken an arm falling off the slide. The Labrador has eaten eggs and is allergic and must be rushed to the vet right now, because she is always apologetic, as if it is her fault, when of course it isn't, because we know she will go and pray for the child or the dog, making allowance for the time difference, because when I had my son, she prayed for me for the 22 hours I was in labour, and she was the first person my husband rang, but not before he stood over my exhausted, shining face and our son in my arms, and told me I must decide right now on a name from my shortlist, as he had to ring her. And because that is why he is Dominic and not Benedict or Lucian after the painter, and because one day he told me he rarely likes his name, and because somehow I know that it's down to her too. So my mother, there was my mother, and then there was my father. They're both gone now. So this is I'm wondering which one to read first. Before he died, he did get ill. He had a fall in London and he was in hospital here. But then, as his health got worse, things got more difficult. My mother had gone already. So this is called Flying In, which is what my sister and I used to have to do. And I've done more than a few walking out of my office and booking a flight and going that night to get there in time. So flying in. When you get there, he's defiant, shunning the walking frame, staggering on two wobbling sticks. He refuses help to reach the toilet and takes a crashing fall that you try and fail to break. You call his neighbour, and you both try and fail to lift him. Help is called. He's furious. He points to you. It's her fault. She pushed me and I fell. They put him on the stretcher and they leave. You've been in the country 2 hours. You're tired and a bit tearful. The neighbour offers you company and a drink. But then you must go back to the empty cottage and pull the curtains and try to sleep. In the ward next morning, he says, "Where have you been? I thought you would never get here." He's forgotten the fall and what he said. He only remembers you were flying in. You drive him back to frail care in the complex, afraid he'll hit you or exit the car. He waves frantically as you pass the cottage, but only to demand you stop to fetch his bottle of bells. Later, "This isn't a proper glass, and where's the ice?" he sneers, holding up the plastic tumbler to the nurse. "This isn't a bar," you tell him, and finally you leave. "Where are you going?" His wail follows you down the corridor as you climb into your mother's old car, start it, and drive down the hill. So there were many more instances of that kind of thing, including one time when I was there and he did not like being in frail care because he was so independent, although he did need to be there. But he was a very tall, large man, and he was some risk to some of the nurses and even the bigger male nurses because he could get violent. But he rang someone who used to work for him, Cape Town, and persuaded them to come out and literally spring him. They were meant to spring him from the jail that was frail care. Only, luckily, at the entrance, they have, let people in, and they rang me and said, "I've got a Mr. So-and-so here." And I said, "Tell him to come to the cottage." And so we talked it through, and his escape didn't work. But in some ways, I kind of admire that as well. But this is the title poem, which is called "These Are the Things We Have Lost." Supposing I can find it. There we go. And this poem was read widely by the family before it was put in the book. And actually, my nephew, who is an award-winning, Emmy-winning documentary maker, he's just won an award for a documentary about Gaza, and he spent a long time in the toughest places in the world by going with the Channel 4 reporters to everywhere that anything awful, terrible was happening. He witnessed the Arab Spring and so on. So he's not a softie, but he rang me up and he said, "Jan, I read this poem and I cried because I feel like you've got him." I hope maybe let's see if you think the same. "These are the things that are lost. You make me a hobby horse from a sock and a broomstick. I call it Marmaduke. I have asthma. You build a pool and teach me to swim. A friend gives me ducklings for my birthday. You build them a pond. They prefer the pool. You buy me an old saddle at auction and wedge it high in the fig tree. With sticky knees, I gallop across the plains of Wyoming. You film me riding flat out at a Jacana in Super 8. Years later, the films are lost, but I remember I won that day. My mother's back seizes up as she lies on my bed, hearing my history homework. You carry her tenderly to bed in your arms. My boyfriend Joe has long hair and a motorbike. He goes to Cram College. He's a vegetarian and part-time nudist. You do not approve of Joe. You come home drunk and shouting. My friend Barbara is taking a bath. You bang on the door. I don't care who's in the fucking bathroom. I bring home an older boyfriend. He should be married with 3 children by now. It would be far more awkward if he was, I say. I marry and leave South Africa to work abroad. You're taking the chicken run, you tell me. You visit often, you take British residents. You should take the 6 million chips off your shoulder, you tell my husband. He says nothing, for what is there that can possibly be said? You grow old, more fearful and angrier. Ring me every morning in case I've died. I speak to you last on FaceTime, on the iPad I gave you for your 90th. Got to go, you shout, angling it so I can see your white stubbled chin and your nostrils. My friends are here. I'll speak to you on the weekend. These are the things that I've lost. I often don't get to the end of that one without breaking up a little bit. So, this is a section I often called Love and Not Love. I hope I'm doing all right for time. You'll just warn me when I'm not. So, it's a mix of poems about, well, you'll see what it's about. Page 30 is the first one. And this is called Two Songs of Johannesburg. The Joburg Hello. He was so urbane, so helpful, paid the parking, pushed the trolley, chatted about London, put my bags in the car. But when he left the trolley dangling like a participle, I found my purse was gone. It was the Joburg hello, the charm, and then the hit. 2. I love you, Josies. I love you, Josies, with your jacarandas and your blossom roads and the glittering JSE and your high white walls and your 5 strands of electric. I love you with your ADT and your armed response and your con men and your kindness. And because you think I am so funny, so naive, and because I am purseless, helpless, in love. This one is pre-2001, pre-September 11, a work trip to New York. Learning to fly. We were learning to fly at the World Trade Center. We were given a bumpy ride. We flew in over the towers. There wasn't a cloud in the sky. We held on to our seats and laughed as the cinema shook, rode down in the elevator, went to Barnes and Noble for books. We were learning to fly. We had the day free. Our driver thought we were lovers. We bought flowers and presents and tea. I shopped in Fifth Avenue, danced with you, slept alone, and still remember the sun on top of the towers, the shimmering sea, the Empire State Building, impossibility, me. This owes a debt to a song called Raining Men, who I'm sure many of us remember. It's called Rain and Men. 1. I was soaked to the skin. You gave me a towel and bourbon in a glass that held a charge for my wet fingers that touched yours. Jim Beam and you, slick South London streets, and me, soaked to the skin I loved being in. 2. Wipers sang on the windscreen in wild Cape rain. We held hands as you drove. You said you loved the rain. I loved the car because you were in it. 3. We climbed the loquat tree and sat in the forked branch, our round fingers laced, holding our breath. We could hear the grown-ups looking for us. The rain tapped quick nails on the shiny, dark green leaves. We bumped noses and called it a kiss. So, back. Oh, I'm wondering how I'm doing on time. So I'm going to jump forward a little and go to writing about horses. So there are only a couple of poems in here, but this one was written many years ago, in fact, about a beautiful big Hanoverian horse who, the minute we bought him, he just stood up on his hind legs every time you tried to ride him. So it was a big adventure, and eventually we got on top of him, as they say, and but he was still quite a fiery horse. So this is the horse. For the horse who saw 4 deer in the green wheat, whose eyes locked with theirs, steady beneath unwavering ears, who broke to run, but swung to face them again with a roar from his heart, who turned and paced and piaffe, tail high, neck a sprung curve, faced them, roared again, who all the while were watching, silent, standing breast high in the green wheat. I stood by with his feed and his halter. He brushed me aside, stood at the hedge's height, below the purple foxgloves, breathing like a lion. So I thought he would, like them, clear 8 feet at a bound, would join the silent, waiting fall, who stood and walked and stood again. Even when they had gone, swiftly, silently, effaced into the places the deer go, he would not eat, but tore at his food, knocked his bucket flying, looked and looked again into the space where they had stood, watching, his heart wild under his thin hide, and that lion's breath at the edge of his breathing. So many years have gone by, still riding, slightly smaller horses now, after a few accidents. And I was riding this little black and white cob that I ride at the moment. And I'm going to show you this, or I think you probably won't be able to see it. It's a special kind of poem, a desire line poem invented by Ella Frears, who's a wonderful poet. So it's in 3 columns, and there's a line down the middle. So I'll read that line at the end, but you've got to imagine it, that you write across, but in the middle is held this line, which is kind of the essence of the poem. And it's called The Stag Stepped from the Shadowed Wood, a desire line poem after Ella Frears. We rode out on the sunlit, heather-purple heath and turned for home. The stag stood sudden, silhouetted, as he stepped out from the trees, into the path, from nowhere to right here. The horse froze, staring at the black, backlit form. Would he run? Should we? Shadowed thoughts raced through us both. The wood no longer clean and empty, but full of his rough coat and split hooves, soft muzzle, reek. We were alike, caught in his deep gaze, the stately turn of the head, the moment's pause, the bright sun a dazzle on our faces, a wonder running in our anxious veins. And oh, the beauty of his crowned head, the gift of his antlers, like a benison. So, how am I doing for time? I think
One more?
Okay. Oh, tricky. I've got 3 more listed.
Yes, three more is good. 3 more is good.
Good.
I'm rubbish about timing, I'm afraid. Well, I'll skip one and just do. Can't see it. This is it's not my only COVID poem, but it's a COVID poem that I wrote 2 years before COVID happened, and I only realised once COVID came along how appropriate it was. And it's called How Glorious It Is to Repeat Things. How glorious it is to repeat things, to note year after year how the small buds begin of the 5-pointed, pale pink, red-tipped blossoms of the Japanese dogwood that stands in your garden, the gift of your friend. How the lilac raises its cushiony, scented head from the twiggy confusions of privet and takes its place in the world. How the swallows come, shy 1 year, bold the next, to spin their web over the garden, dark beneath the white flight trails. How they squawk with their chicks in the beams of the stables, and come by so close in their hunting that their wings almost brush your cheek. And when you can't know for sure if you will see it again, and how can any of us know, the spring, every gold-padded dandelion on the daisied grass, each time the dog sits close or the cat complains, until you pick her up, when the old horse wickers low for his pleasure of seeing you, when you see again a face you love, how glorious it is to repeat things. If you will allow me, I'm going to finish with Gone to Seed, because it is it's a positive poem in a really terrible world at the moment. And I hope this comes true. It's called Gone to Seed. You say it like it's a bad thing, but those silken grasses that willow and weave beneath the wind, they are sowing their own selves into the black earth. They have made more of more. They are reaping what they sow and sowing it once more. The lion's breath of the bracken whispers through the hock high grass. The field mice and the rabbits live secretly and lushly beneath it. The horses wade through it, and at its edges the trees bend their heads to admire it, telling each other quietly, "Can you see what they've done here? Can you see what we've done here? What we are is beautiful and full and kind and expansive. What we will do is even better. We have gone to seed, and the world will reap what we sow." Thank you.
And that was an absolutely beautiful reading. Can we have a hand, please? And the people unmute and give us that applause. Wow, that was an extraordinary reading. Thank you.
I see some people have come in when I haven't. Oh, and Barbara's there. Yeah, the guy. I've just seen a few names that I recognise. Yes, thank you so much. I think Jack, you mentioned that there might be a Q&A.
If that's okay with you.
That's fine. Yes.
Okay, so I guess this is where I step in to help here with this part of the evening. Janice, thank you. It was really beautiful reading, and I have one or two things I'd like to ask, but I can either start us off with a question, or is anyone who wants to jump in? Please feel free to raise an actual or virtual hand. Okay, so Jack, you're quick on the draw as usual. Would you like to start us off?
Well, I have um, more praise than questions, really. But I'm struck by I'm sort of formulating this as I go, but I'm struck by how good you are at writing elegies.
Mm.
There are beautiful hauntings throughout the book, and they are generous, um, hence the title. And then you end on a few poems that are so beautifully, fiercely in the present. And I wonder if you want to say something about that and I don't know, how you decided to put those poems at the end, what the process was.
Mm.
Maybe it's connected to riding. I think of other poets who were great walkers. Wordsworth is the first who comes to mind for me. And you know, I don't know if you want to say something about that, about how writing puts you in the present, because those poems to me, I love all the poems in the book. But those poems feel different, and they're a wonderful ending to the book.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, I think I always wanted to end the book with those, but I did have help in the ordering of the poems from my publisher, Fly on the Wall Press. I have to mention Isabel Canyon. She's fantastic. So she's a great publisher and great editor as well, and she reordered my original sort of manuscript. Although I think with those, I did want those towards the end, and I think if there's a direction I'm going in, I mean, I think I've written, and obviously in a very heartfelt way, about what I've lost. So in some ways, I need to move forward, and some ways that ending poem, I actually read that for my sister's 70th video that was made for her 70th birthday, and I felt it kind of represented her family and what they are like, and what they've represented to the world, because they're all incredibly special people. But I think that probably the fact that there's so much nature in the poems, it reflects where I live. I live in a farm cottage in the middle of a farm that doesn't belong to us, but over which we happily look, and at the forests up the hill, the Ashdown forest, and we have deer in the fields by the window. We have horses there, so we're very lucky in where we live, and I think that connects you more fully to nature, and I think that gives me the images that I want. Like, I took that phrase "gone to seed," which of course is in fact and often a negative. It's kind of expressed in a negative way, and I thought, no, it isn't a negative; it's a positive, and turned that around. So I hope I'm answering your question, because
Yes.
because yes, there wasn't sort of elegiac section to the book, if you like. But I do like now the way it's ordered, in the sense that we end with something that is a little bit more optimistic, and I love to use nature in my poems. I always think I don't write that much about horses, but actually they are in quite a lot of poems, even if it's just a line. And someone once introduced me, the chairman of our poetry society introduced me to someone, and here's Janice, she's our vice chair. She writes mainly about domestic violence and horses, which made me laugh. It was slightly weird, a sort of juxtaposition there. But nevertheless, those are, important themes.
I love the horse that roars.
Yes.
That wants to.
Cool.
He
Well,
just
I think that they're domestic, as a kind of domesticated creatures, but they're not really, are they? They're very
yeah.
close to the wild Mustang or Brumby or whatever they are in different parts of the world. And they are very thin-skinned, and they are a prey animal, so they're very, very sensitive to communication. That's why they're so good at healing. That's why they're used for healing people. But yes, and that's why over the last few years I've come off horses a few times, and big ones. So it's a long way down, and that's because a horse can be absolutely fine one minute, and the next minute it thinks something is about, probably a plastic bag or something, is about to kill it, and it's spun around and galloped off, and you might end up on the ground. So yeah, they are extraordinary creatures, not to be taken lightly.
Can you hear me, Janice? Sorry.
Yes, yes.
Okay, my connection doesn't seems to have problems at the moment, but
Yeah.
that's why I'm not seeing my face, but I was showing my face, as it were. But the question I had, or the two questions I had, I guess relate more to your process, and it seems to me that what you salvage in the storytelling is a lot of things, but one of them is, it feels to me like you get to the kernel of some kind of emotional truth in a lot of the poems, and that's what makes them powerful.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you want to respond to that. And the other question is really about the very pared down, direct style of writing, and perhaps the link to working in journalism. I don't know if you want to run with that. Okay.
That's it. I'll do the second one first. That's interesting. I'm smiling because on the call is well, I think Jean might be there as well. I hope she is. But it's Guy Berger, who's one of the freedom fighters I was talking about, and who's in the book I wrote called Class of '79, because he was at this university where it turned out a lot of journalists, and some of them turned out to be heroes of the struggle, as he did. But he also ran the journalism department there, so we have that connection. And yeah, I think that's probably right. I think when I got to university, I was told by my journalism professors that my writing was too like long-winded and like an English major, and then I was told, when I wrote my essays, that for English literature that my writing was too journalistic. So maybe there's something in that. But I think I do. I really like to be as direct as possible, and I'm aware I swear quite a lot in these poems. So I'm glad there are no children present. But I do, yeah. I think I want above all not to be sentimental. That's my absolute death. I do not want to be sentimental about anything. And so that might mean I'm a bit too perhaps direct in some of the things I say in my poems. Now, could you just perhaps repeat the first question for me?
Sure. I was just thinking as you were reading that many of the poems reach some kind of emotional shard or emotional truth. There's something that stays with one beyond the narrative elements. Not to be sort of. There's just something like an emotional core in the poems that you seem to reach. And is that perhaps maybe another way of asking the question is, are you then happy that the poem is at a good place to sign off?
Yeah.
I'm just grappling around here for a question you may find interesting, and I'm hoping that
that is interesting. And when you mentioned like the ending of poems, they are so difficult. And I have someone who's helped me a lot in my poetry. It's been in my life for a long time. Actually, I haven't seen her recently. Dr. Ros Barber. Now, she was my supervisor at Sussex University when I did my MA, and she was my supervisor at Goldsmiths, where I got halfway through my my PhD, and I've actually withdrawn for the moment. But she was very good, particularly on poetry, and said to me a couple of things. One of them was, don't be too indirect. There's another word she used. Can't remember what it is now. Sometimes you're so indirect about what you're saying that I don't know what you're saying. So she taught me to be direct, but she also said something else which I found very useful over the years, which is when you get to the end of when you think you've got this poem written and it's all wrapped up with the last line that kind of ties it in a bow, you probably need to lose that last line. So it's a bit like Coco Chanel apparently used to say, when you're all dressed up and going out. Obviously, she was visiting people not in Wellington boots to mark horses out, but people who were dressed up with a lot of jewelry on and, a lovely Coco Chanel suit. Look at yourself in the mirror and take one thing off. Not hopefully the suit, but, take off an extra bangle or the earrings. You probably got too much going on there. And I think that applies to poems as well, in a slightly less glamorous way. But I've always been careful to do those two things. Still searching for the word that she used. It's like maybe it was abstruse or something. But I was always so careful not to be too flowery that sometimes I went too much the other way. So yes, I think that is a big thing for me, to be direct.
Very interesting. I mean, for me, that's one of the most rewarding things of hearing the poems is something sticks. There's a feeling or a grief poems, many other poems.
Thank you.